Welcome to another podcast where we help aspiring developers get jobs and junior developers grow. Today, with me, again, I have my old boss, good friend, really good developer, Danny. We're going to be talking about working from home. And I think I kind of just want to give a little context to this. Uh, when I first met Danny, it was remote. I actually didn't meet him until I had moved on to another company, like over a year down the road. It he he's incredible with communication. He really was one of my best bosses, and he did this so incredibly well because he just knows what it takes to be a successful remote developer. So I wanted to touch base with him, bring him on, and pick his brain a little bit. So welcome, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Always happy to have you. You want to just jump into the meat of this?
Sure, let's do it.
All right. So you had talked about before, like one of the most important things about working from home was kind of like having a routine. Can you dive into that a little bit? What do you mean?
Yeah, I think it's just super important to set up a routine and stick to it like a religion every single day. Like that means getting up for work, starting work at the same time, trying to take lunch at the same time, being as consistent as possible, and setting a cadence that your teammates can rely on, sort of a pattern that they can rely on. That they know that like, oh, it's between 12 and 1. Don always takes lunch from 12 to 1. He's very
Mm-hmm.
good about that. So just taking any of the ambiguity or guesswork out of like your day to day and setting that rigid schedule for yourself is important. And I think that goes all the way towards like, maybe taking a shower every morning and like getting dressed. Because I've always found that like, that kind of puts me in the right sort of
Yeah.
mind space for getting the day going, is to just get dressed, get a shower, have that like mental break between like waking up and getting ready and actually like going into the office.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't even think about that because uh, there is also the perception of how how you're doing as working remote in terms of uh, like if you give your team kind of a consistency to expect from you, that's kind of a really positive thing. I've never thought of it like that. So what? I guess we're digging into the weeds a little bit. Like, what do you think? Like, what about a routine really helps an individual?
Yeah, I think it sort of it creates a discipline, that sort of day to day rhythm, and it kind of staves away like the bad habits. Like it's kind of easy to get into a thing where like, oh, maybe I'll start work kind of early, maybe I'll take a breakfast and like leave the office from like 9 to 10, maybe I'll come back and work through lunch. Maybe I'll watch a little TV from 1 to 2. Like, I think a routine, having something rigid to set your watch to, can sort of stave off those little things that can become bad habits, because it doesn't really take a lot long, in my personal experience, for like, a little cheat here and there, like, oh, I'm gonna put a movie on in the background. Suddenly, like I'm pulled into the movie. Like, I think a routine's good to keep you regimented, keep you on task.
That makes a lot of sense. I've definitely been guilty of uh, just letting 5 minutes. Oh, I'm gonna take a 5 minute break here, 10 minute break here, like turn into a 30 minute break. I I wish I would have kind of talked to you earlier and asked you about this, but I didn't realize like routine was probably a fix to that. Um, that's interesting. I like that. Well, so all that makes sense, and I really like the idea of just getting your mindset right, like your headspace right in the morning, and like taking a shower. For me, like, have you ever? This is kind of like another off-topic thing. Have you ever done like I don't know, like daily affirmations or meditation in the morning or anything like that?
Yeah, I've done that. I've never been like really good about making it sort of like a mainstay in my like day to day, but I've always heard that like even if you just spend 30 seconds a morning, like sitting down and centering yourself, if you can't find the time for that, like to do something really small, like you can make a habit just by starting super small. Um, I'm still not very good at that, but yeah, I think that is like a really good ritual, and I think that's like you make a good point. It's like find the ritual that like really works for you and puts you into like a space where like you're feeling like energetic and productive and like ready for the day.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, like you said, everyone kind of has their own ritual. Just take some time, try things out, and find it. Uh, so we get our day started, right? What kind of like what does your desk look like? Like, let's think about like workspace because you talked about like how that really motivates you and influences kind of like the work that you do and the way you feel about yourself. What's your desk look like?
Well, I've got like a standing desk, and then I've got next to it like a seated desk. So I can stand most of the day, but then when I start to like kind of get tired, like toward the end of the day, I can switch to the seated desk, or I can alternate off and on. Um, but I try to keep them like pretty tidy. I've always found that like having a lot of clutter around your desk can kind of like lead to just feeling just sort of like disorganized, and it's always nice to go into your workspace and have it be like nice and
Mm-hmm.
clean and tidy, and I've always just found it easier to focus when I'm not like distracted by all the garbage like stacked up around me, although that can happen, but like I think it's important to like emphasize trying to keep your space um,
Yeah.
tidy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I get this. I'd go as far as almost feeling like a little anxious when I just like come to my desk and I have just things piled around. It's not a good feeling. And I do. I feel great and I feel productive when I just have a clear space. It just allows me to think better. And I never thought it would like influence me that much, but it really does. It's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, I think it's important like to think about, because you're at your desk a lot and little behaviors can sort of stack up over time. So like really think about like the ergonomics of your desk and like, you know, is it set up in a way where like you have like good posture and like your arms are in a good position? Because like just being kind of uncomfortable over the course of like many months or years can like down the road create like, you know, back issues, stuff like that. So, really stay on top of like having the keyboard at the right height or finding a chair that's comfortable to sit in, like those types of things. Like, I got into a habit for a while of just like kind of slumping on the couch with the
Mm,
keyboard in my
yep.
lap, which is kind of comfortable, but like I realized I would tend to hunch forward a little bit while I was working on some like coding stuff. And next thing I know, like a couple weeks later, like my neck and shoulders are killing me. So the standing desk for me like really helps me to like just stand up straight and have good posture and have fewer back issues.
So you really vouch for that standing desk, huh?
I like it. It's great. And I read somewhere that if you're standing and working, like you burn like 170 calories an hour or something like that. So
Are
if
you
you're like
serious?
trying to like stay fit and watch what you eat and that kind of stuff, or exercise, standing is literally kind of exercise for you.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I had no idea about that, but I know I would never look back after getting my standing desk. I'd never look back.
Yeah,
I like this
I
thing.
would say like I would recommend investing in like a anti-fatigue mat to stand on, because that hard ground or whatever under your feet kind of can cause foot problems over a while. So it's like can't stand too much, can't sit too much. You gotta like find that happy balance.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think you pretty much covered everything. I forgot about the like. I have a foot pad right now. You're absolutely right about that. Well, so what? As far as kind of like workspace, you can control your own workspace. You can keep your desk clean, have pictures or anything else to inspire you throughout the day around you. But most importantly, like you control your workspace. But a lot of people that do work from home, sometimes when the kids come home or, wife, husband, whoever, sometimes you can't control that, right? See a family. So how do you kind of like control your own productivity and time when you kind of have family around?
Yeah, I think the first thing to have is a little bit of patience because and just expect that you're going to have more interruptions at home with a family and like kids and dogs and everything else. So
Oh,
just
forgot
like
about the
kind of
dogs.
going with the mindset that you may get interrupted, but if you can like have those conversations with your kids and or your wife or what have you or your husband to say, you know, between the hours of this and this, like I really need to focus. Like maybe you can like close the door. Maybe that's a signal that like you're in some deep focus time. Like maybe you can like hang a funny sign on the door or something.
Do
Like
you have a funny sign to hang?
no, I don't. I don't. My dogs would just bust right through that. And there's like maybe you put on headphones, put on music, so when your kids or your husband or wife see you in headphones, they're like, "Uh-oh, daddy's in deep focus time."
I like
But
that.
I would say like if you had to have kids and they burst in, um, uh, take a moment and just say hello to them and
Yeah.
reinforce that or when I have to focus, like send them off and do their own thing. I don't have kids because I can't really give a ton of advice. It's like if kids actually listen and respect if you say daddy's working, you gotta. So I don't know, but I think it's going to take a little like you know co work from your spouse to like keep these kids off of me for like the next couple hours. I got a lot going on right now. So,
I like it. So communication with the spouse.
yeah, communication's key.
That's good. Hey, let's dive into that. When we were working, I think one of the big highlighting factors about you and why everyone had so much respect for you was your communication. Even just working remote, your communication was incredible. Like a lot of people, they counted on you for so much, and you were so far away. So I think communication is really powerful. I want to dive into that. Like how, how do you become a good communicator when you're working remote? Let's go with that.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, like because most of my team at the time was in the office and I was outside of the office. So you just try to think like, how can I be as in the office as possible, even though I'm remote? Like, and that usually means over communicating to a certain degree. That means being really proactive in Slack to keep people updated, whether you like leave people like sort of morning notes or evening notes as to like things they might need to know, being readily available to hop on a call with someone sort of impromptu if they have a question. A lot of times that's a lot easier than just typing back and forth through Slack. um, yeah, just finding ways to think like how can I be more present to the teammates, because it's like now that we're all working from home, it's kind of like it's on all of us to sort of think of ways to be more communicative to each other. um, yeah, I just think it's there's a mindfulness that has to be there about like
Mm-hmm.
um, it's a proactivity to like keep people informed as to what's going on.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed with you was you were always available. Um, you were, and I think that was a big key. That's what made it feel like you weren't remote, was because we could just hop on a video call. And I was surprised at, like, even just like the good working relationship we could build just by video chat. Video chat is powerful. Like, a lot of people feel like they're disconnected but I think you're an exception, and I think other people can be an exception as well. Like you can still hold really good working relationships and uh, deliver all the information you need through video. It like it works. I mean, I didn't believe it worked, but like it actually does work really well when communication is a priority. Um,
Yeah,
so
video is super important. Like, I think, there's a tendency to perhaps like keep the video off and then maybe just do audio. So I would definitely recommend sort of leaning into like turning the video on if you have the option to like be face to face with someone. And like, if you're having a coding issue with a colleague or a product person asks you a question about a product, like, instead of like sending them screenshots or chatting to them about it, like say, hey, can you hop on a quick call for 2 minutes and I can show you this like screen share, that kind of thing.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, we kind of touched into this a little bit when we were talking earlier, but we talked a little bit about habits, and that kind of comes from developing a routine, and we talked about potential like one little bad habit can kind of snowball into something that ruins your routine, and all of a sudden you lose your consistency day after day. Uh, like, what kind of bad habits do you want to watch out for?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. There's like definitely good habits that increase your productivity and keep you focused, and then on the other side of that, there's bad habits that are gonna like take you out of your focus and whatnot. So for me, it's like putting the TV on in the background. I always try to avoid that. It's like maybe taking a longer lunch than you normally would. Um, Maybe it's going off site and working someplace like outside of your home can become a bad habit to be like it's always nice to have a change of venue and mix it up. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like going down to like a cafe or something and working every now and then. But if you get into the habit where you're doing it every single day, and then every call you're on, there's a whole lot of background noise, that can over time become annoying to your
Yeah.
colleagues. So, yeah. um, you know, uh, good habits, bad habits. Bad habits, you just gotta like keep an eye out for them because you'll recognize them when you're like, oh, I'm kind of doing this thing more often than I should. Maybe it's playing video games after lunch. It's like, oh, I've got another 30 minutes. I'll play a little bit of Call of Duty or whatever, and next thing you know, you've gone over your lunch. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring up going out to like a cafe. One thing I noticed, I it was annoying when people would even like before stand up hit, they'd already be at a cafe, and then you'd hear all the noise throughout stand up. They would have to mute once they finally remembered to mute, and then once they unmuted, you heard everything as they were giving their updates. I think I love kind of avoiding that situation just for your team. But a lot of people like going to cafes. I think a lot of people, it might even just be the dream of being developers, or just like once they get that freedom, they appreciate it. Uh, but they like going to different places, and they think it's productive.
Yeah, and
And
I think
so,
you'll learn like over time sort of what your schedule is day to day, and you'll be able to kind of know when those good pockets are for like doing a cafe. It's like, oh, I know on Tuesday and Thursday evenings between like 1 and 5, I never have to really take calls. So like those are good times to do it. Yeah, and I don't, and if I have a teammate like who's occasionally like, oh, sorry guys, my internet was kind of on the fritz, so I'm at a cafe. Sorry for the noise. Like
mhm,
it's not a big deal.
yeah.
Like every now and then. But if it's like, oh, here's Don with the background noise again. Like, does this guy have a home? I'm not sure.
Don't we pay
It
him?
becomes like, a pain point. Like, and I guess that's what I'm thinking is you never want to be thought of as like a pain point like to your team, and that goes
Yeah.
towards creating like a space where it's quiet, or like communicating like or someone tries to reach out to you and you don't answer. It's like, oh, that
Mm.
Danny Peck, he's never I text him and like it takes him an hour to get back to me every single time. Like, don't create bad patterns for people.
I think that's important. I think that's really important. But you also talk about like breaking out of the routine as well. So from what I kind of understand, like it's great once in a while. It's good. So my question is, like every now and then, if you need to like just go to the cafe or the monotony is, you just kind of break out of it. And I think sometimes that is healthy. How do you go about doing that without creating a bad pattern or bad habit?
Yeah, it's a good point. You gotta like you can't be a drone in your house 24/7. Like, I think it's important to get fresh air and take a walk every now and then, like get out of your house, like go to a cafe occasionally. And I think that's super important. You know, take an occasional meeting in a loud environment if you need to. Um, you just gotta like find that good balance. Like, yeah, like you should definitely take a walk. If you took a walk every day, that would be awesome. Like maybe after lunch or after work, as a sort of like way to have that mental break between the end of the day and like transitioning into your personal life again. Like, that's a walk is a good way to have that break. Or in the morning, a lot of people walk before work to kind of like create that like I'm commuting to work thing in the
Interesting.
brain to like transition into work. Um, and change it up, like maybe yeah, maybe instead of working in your office all day, you take a walk in the morning, and then maybe you do like work in a different room in the house for like it's kind of sad that like right now, like you know that's changing it up, is changing rooms, but like
Hmm.
whatever works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that doesn't mean like changing your Zoom background. That actually means getting up. And
Right.
I still haven't figured out how to do that, but I haven't looked it up. Well, so I think I think you started to touch on it a little bit, like, but a lot of people I think that are working remote, especially if you're doing it multiple days in a row, it can kind of uh, I guess it's easy to feel kind of like alone and stuck and like just feel separated. You know, what can you do about that? And yeah, like how like whenever you felt that way, how did you tackle that?
Yeah, it's a lot of it goes to your company culture. Like we have this really great thing right now where we like do like virtual beer carts, like on Friday evenings, where everyone can open a video chat and like sort of be working, but also be kind of chatting and hanging out and that kind of thing. And like you can create those types of events like within your team as well. Like, um, me and some colleagues got online one Friday afternoon and we did some like video games, like the four of us. We did a little Xbox. That was great. So just staying open to like either accepting an event like that when someone like invites you to it, or taking the initiative and actually like creating one and sending it out to like some people in your team. Like, be surprised how many other people are also like eager to have a little FaceTime, or
Hmm.
break away from work for a minute.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are happy to kind of jump on. Sometimes you get overwhelmed with work, but I know I always found relief in it. I like that. I like that idea of just virtual beer cart and just
Yeah.
you know turning your cam. I didn't even think of that. I don't think I've ever done that at a company. That's pretty cool. Did we
Yeah,
do
that's
that
pretty
at
cool.
Analyte?
And like a lot of like great sort of off-topic chatter comes up, and it's a good way to have that sort of like camaraderie and like joke around about. It's kind of like your water cooler like moment virtually. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. Do you so I feel like you have a lot of good habits working from home, and I do think you're a good model for it. Do you feel like how do you feel about the majority of people working from home? Do you see other people having the same good habits, or do you feel like a lot of people struggle with it?
I think a lot of people do pretty well, actually. One thing that it seems like a lot of people um, kind of struggle with are like balancing family and like children responsibilities. And I think it just goes back to having patience for your team members. Like if they are having a child meltdown and they need to like step away from a meeting or have to run and pick someone up, just to let them do that. It's not a big deal. But I think by and large, I've seen a lot of like really great remote employees, responsive, and I just think I'm probably lucky to be able to say that. But I guess it's just having people on your team that care to do a good job. So it's nice to see.
The people that you work with that are mainly remote, do you feel like are they 100% remote, or are they like 80%, 60%, like 3 days out of the week?
Yeah, a lot of them are, if not most of them, are just sort of like, work from home maybe a day or two, like
Okay.
out of the week. So not so much full time.
Okay. All right. That makes a lot of sense. From my end, maybe I've just been on different teams. I have seen some people struggle, and they kind of talk about it a little bit. And it's not like they just don't get things done. It's just a different environment. And I think in recent months, just working from home a little bit more often, people have been like looking up good articles like yours because they realize that it takes effort. It takes initiation to like really develop these good habits. What would you recommend? So someone that's like working remote for the first time in their entire life, they like I think it's you talked about building up those good habits and doing it early. Uh, what are like a few key tips that you'd recommend for people that are just starting and that might not be ready for kind of like the mindset shift? They got to adjust to it.
Yeah. Um, I would say that, getting up, getting a shower, getting dressed, getting into the office, setting that cadence. And then if you're like a programmer or someone who doesn't need to constantly be in meetings, I feel like having really good music is an excellent
Uh,
motivator to being productive. It helps get me in the zone at least. So even on days where I'm not feeling productive, if I put on some great music, like something instrumental or something for my
yeah.
that's my personal taste for like when I'm programming, just snaps me right into like wanting to be productive. Not sure what that is, but I like that's one of my favorite tips is to get some music going. Um, yeah, and I would say, if you're starting out, I would just try to like reduce the distractions as much as possible in your workspace and just in your home. Like distraction, whether it's like uh, TV, movies, or um, you know, noise in the home. Finding that like quiet place where you kind of don't have a choice but to focus on work
Hmm.
can
Yeah.
help if you're new to it.
You know, I really like the idea of just the tip of music. It's powerful when you just associate it with work, and like it is kind of the same theme. It is the same genre. It kind of clicks you right into the mindset that you need. So I'm a big fan of classical myself. Like when I'm coding, just because there are no lyrics and it does something to my brain that it just I don't know if it's just because it's an association now or what, But I put on indie classical radio on Pandora, and that does it. That's like every morning for me. And
That's really nice.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is. I really like that. So, what about? I guess what kind of tools like we're developers. There have to be certain tools that can help us with our productivity and kind of just monitoring things. Do you have any like maybe like a top tool that you would suggest, or even a few?
Yes, I would say my favorite work from home companion is it's a silly little Mac tool called Shush. And all it really does is it sits in your menu bar and then it gives you a universal, like global way of controlling the microphone. So if you have to switch between like Zoom and Google Meet and Skype and whatever else, you don't have to worry about like muting the mic in the individual app. You can just like keep everything unmuted and then just use this app like to quickly mute and unmute your microphone. And then you can set it up to be like push to talk or push to mute. So if you hold down a certain key on your keyboard, it kind of opens your mic. That way, makes it really easy to push, like say what you need to say in the meeting, and then release the key, and you don't have to worry about like blasting the meet with like dogs barking or kids screaming or anything like that. And I always see this like in video calls, people get on and like, there's a dozen people that haven't muted. So there's all this noise, or someone goes to talk and they can't find the unmute button. So using something like Shush uh, is a great way to get around that. So you don't have to relearn how to unmute every time you like try a new video chat software.
Uh, that's a good tool. I probably should have asked you that while I was working at Catalytic, because I remember struggling with the mute button probably every single meeting. I'm sure I irritated teammates with it, but that's a pretty cool tool. I like it. Uh, do you have any like productivity tools? Maybe something like for time management or time tracking, just off the top of your head.
Yeah, I there's a really great add-on for like Chrome, and it's essentially a Pomodoro timer. And you can kind of there's a bunch of these, but basically they allow you to set an interval where typically with like a Pomodoro timer, it'll interval between like 10 minutes, 2 minutes. So it'll just kind of reset. It'll run for 10 minutes and then it'll run for 2 minutes. So that allows you to set a focus timer. So when it's running, you focus intently for 10 minutes, and then when the time's up, you take a 2-minute break, and it just kind of repeats over and over again. And you just kind of like live and die by this Pomodoro timer to keep you productive. And some of them are pretty fancy. Like while the timer is running, you can have it block certain apps from your browser. So when you're in focus mode, you can't go to Reddit, you can't go to Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. So that can be a pretty great productivity tool.
That's I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro timer, and I use versions of it. This is kind of a question I think a lot of people ask, and it's not really specific to remote, but I think you would have a good idea. I really just want to get your perspective. What do you feel like is a good, like a sweet spot? If you were to use kind of that interval style of, productivity and then take a little bit of a break. For you specifically, what do you think is a good sweet spot where like this amount of time, I'm just going to burst through this, I'm going to work, and then I'm going to take this amount of break? What's your ratio?
Yeah, I think it's I would say it probably is 10 minutes on, 2 minutes off.
Really?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember there's like and I'm not going to remember it, but there's essentially this sort of like rule for avoiding eye strain, where it says every 10 minutes, look at something 10 feet away for 10 seconds. I think that's what it is. And so if you do a 10-minute Pomodoro timer, when it goes off, you can like look away like at something in the distance for 10 seconds at least to kind of like give your eyes that physical break,
Okay.
to avoid eye strain and headaches and stuff like that. So I think that might be it. It might be 20 minutes, 20 feet, 20 seconds. I'm not sure. But either one would work, I think.
Okay.
So, but I do like that 10-minute on, 2-minute off, because it's really nice to just stop and stretch and look around and have that mental break. I know that seems like kind of a short interval, but I've always found that like going back to work after that little break, problems can sometimes seem a little easier.
You know what? That's interesting. Um, do you feel like I love the idea of more breaks, especially for my vision? I can actually already tell that my vision's gotten a tiny bit blurry over the years, and it's definitely looking at the computer screen too long. I know it is. Um, do you feel like you can really get into the zone with programming when you take a break after 10 minutes?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm definitely guilty of um, like turning that timer off when I really get into the zone. So I think it's more of a guide, not a rule. Um, if you find that you know you're really grinding and you're making great progress on something, and you want to like disable that timer for a few cycles, then I think there's nothing wrong with that. But generally, it's really good to um, have that break where you can step away and do a couple laps in your room, get up from your desk and stretch, take some deep breaths, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I I like the idea of taking a couple laps. I wonder if anyone kind of just has like maybe a treadmill set up, or they just take like a 5 minute walk. Some people have walking desks. They take
Oh
their
yeah,
break. I mean, but I do I like the idea of not only like taking a break, but I don't know. I found that exercise like really helps. Not like heavy exercise, like high intensity, but just like going for like a really brief walk or something like that. It just like refreshes my mind when I'm stuck on a problem. Um,
absolutely. And I would say I would add on to that. It's a really good tip to also um, don't be afraid to like end the day on time and like even though you might have a coding problem that's not finished yet. I know like it's there's an instinct to want to wrap up everything before you like call it a day so you don't have to think about it. But um, I can't even tell you how many times I've like been grinding on this problem. I say finally like, F it. It's 6 o'clock. I'm just gonna like leave it broken. Try not to think about it. And then almost always the following morning I'll come in fresh and like have it fixed within like the first 10 to 30 minutes. So definitely recommend like walking away from something broken, like learning to like leave something broken uh, is a really helpful thing.
that's powerful too. That would help so many people if they just listen to that. I would stay up evenings at Analyte, like trying to figure out, like when we switched to WordPress, and I just really didn't know PHP that well and WordPress, and I would just stay up way too late trying to figure those problems out. But it always came to me when I woke up. I like it was a skill to learn to let things go for the night.
Absolutely.
It was. So, like I think you gave a lot of really good tips for working from home. What so I think like a lot of people are going to try to be productive, do a good job, really grow with their communication. But I think another healthy thing is to be able to assess how well you're doing. And I think getting feedback from your manager is healthy, and that maybe that is your way of doing it. But I think self-assessment is really powerful, and just recognition of like what like you're gonna care more about your growth probably than anyone else. So um, like I think self-assessment is important in that sense. So how do you assess that you are being productive, that you are communicating well, that you're developing really good habits working from home? And I know this might kind of seem like an abstract question, but I want to think about it. Like how do you just assess that you are growing as a remote developer?
Yeah, it's a good question. One like practical thing that I've gotten into the habit doing is I um, set a reminder on my phone to go off like every Monday morning at like 7 a.m. So it's before the work week. It's like the sort of like, ding that like the new week's about to begin. And I create that as an opportunity to like, number one, just sort of like look forward. I'll like open the calendar and I'll just see what events are happening that week. Um, and then I'll like sort of like think about like things I want to accomplish that week at a very high level. And then I'll look at the things that I said I wanted to accomplish from the previous week. So it's like a retrospective, like for yourself.
Yeah.
And I feel like, if you do that kind of thing and you're seeing that like you know, accomplished the things that you set up from the previous week, um, that that's going to be some good proof that you're on the right track. And like, I don't think anyone's going to be like perfect at being a remote developer or employee right out of the gate. Like I still like feel like I'm learning lessons every year. Um, but it's all about like being patient with your own progress and making progress, whatever that looks like. If it's little things or big things.
I like that. It's really just from what I hear, it's setting goals for yourself. Your goals might be different than others, but it is little like, self introspection, and kind of like just like you would do retros with coding, and you just do it with yourself. I really like that.
Yeah. And I would also say like, be patient with
Yeah.
your own with yourself. And if you have shortfalls, like don't beat yourself up over them. Like, it's a process. So just try to be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
we're all just trying to we're all just trying to learn the best ways to do things. Failing as we go, that's like, what we do.
That's true. I really like that mindset. I think it's healthy and I think it's encouraging. Well, you know, these were all really good tips. I think we touched on everything that I wanted to touch on. Again, I wasn't lying. I really like your article. It's why I posted on LinkedIn and shared it with some other people. So, um, what I'd like to do is I'm gonna pause it here. So this will like be out of the recording, and then I'll continue. We'll kind of just end the podcast. But we have a little bit of time, like 10 minutes. Do you mind sticking around just to answer some questions?
Sure, happy to.
All right. All right. We'll go ahead and continue. All right. So again, I think all this is really good advice. Danny, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I actually am going to post the article that a lot of this conversation revolves around that Danny wrote himself. I'm going to share that in the podcast notes so you can check it out. But again, Danny, thanks so much for hopping on and talking about remote work. Like I said, you're one of the best remote developers I've worked with. To be fair, one of the few, but I but I have just like it gave me a completely different perspective of working remote because I sometimes you hear about things and remote developers maybe not being so productive. You were a good model for it, so I think it was great talking with you.
Well, always good talking to you, man. Like you're still one of my favorite engineers on the planet. So really, really lucky to have had a chance to work with you. I hope to do it again in the future. I mean, um, I'm sure our paths will cross and we'll be able to do some sort of project that'd be kind of fun.
I think so too. I definitely think so too. Well, cool. Thanks, Danny. Thanks for hopping on. And yeah, any final tip you'd like to leave for people that are trying to get into just working remote?
I'd say like try to find that opportunity to do it, like where to. I didn't really plan on working remote for the duration, but I started working remote like, geez, in 2009 now, and I haven't been in an office since then. So that just happened to be like I was working as a contractor at the time, and I was working in an office with them and I was moving at the time, so they allowed me to just sort of work offsite remotely, but continue contract work, and it just ended up going really well. And they converted me over to a full-time employee from a contract employee, and that just sort of became this catalyst for like trying to like, oh, maybe I want to get a new job, but I still want to remain remote. But so now I have a little bit of a resume that has that. Oh, by the way, you don't have to like buy a desk for me because, or have lease office space for me, so because I can work from home. Like if you can prove that you're an offsite employee that can actually like execute, and um, you know you don't have any lags in your communication and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a win-win for the business because they don't have, like I said, they don't have to lease you the space for the desk. Um, it's a win-win. So, one little job work from home can balloon into, now I think I'm like 3, 4 jobs in working from home. So I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I love that. Kind of starting with a contract position and just showing that you can work from home. And I think a lot of people have had that opportunity to show how productive they can work from home,
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
how
it's more and
productive
more
they can be.
normalized. And like, PS, I would definitely caveat this all by saying, like, some people just don't want to work from home. Like, just for whatever reason, at the end of the day, like, aren't productive, just do not like it. Like, I'm like, maybe they're extroverted by nature. I don't understand these people, but they exist. But they, maybe they just need to have that sort of office camaraderie. And like,
Mm-hmm.
I say that all the more power to them. But I do know there's a lot of people out there like me who are more introverted, who thrive in sort of like a solitary space where they can focus and work on code and stuff.
Yeah.
That they just need to find that opportunity to get started and prove themselves, and then they can continue proving themselves. And then you build references, and it's like, oh well, I have these like 3 different managers who can attest that like, oh yeah, he did fine, she did fine working from home.
That's fantastic advice. I hope a lot of people find that valuable. Uh, Danny, thanks so much for hopping on again. A pleasure talking with you. And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk soon and we'll kind of jump right into the questions. So,
Yeah, totally. Sounds great. Loved it.